To China now, where the ruling Communist Party has begun 4 days of high-level talks. Strategies to help its troubled economy are expected to be a priority. The plenary session takes place every 5 years, and it's a platform to discuss crucial economic reforms and long-term policies. Foreign investors are keeping a close eye on it, especially since the Chinese economy is seeing slower than expected growth. There are lower job numbers, a real estate crisis and weak consumer demand. And trade tensions with Western countries are another issue. Analysts have warned of a lack of investor confidence. Wang is the chief economist with Seng Bank in China. She joins us live from Shanghai. Welcome to Al Jazeera. So the plenum begins as China, as I mentioned there, reported its slowest rate of economic growth in April to June since the first quarter of 2023, affected in part by this real estate crisis. Why is that happening?
Well, the Chinese government decided that it's important to treat the housing crisis because one way or another, if China is going to have a financial crisis, it's going to be linked with the housing and reflected in the banking sector. So in 2022, Chinese government started this deleveraging campaign among the property developers. As a result, the housing sales, housing investment contracted sharply. Comparing to the peak in 2021, the housing prices in China in major cities has declined by 30%. And that also dragged down the consumption as well.
So how do we expect the Chinese government to respond to these key challenges?
Well, we're expecting more of a long-term approach because in the short term, it seems that monetary policy and fiscal policy are both having great constraints. The central bank has very little room to cut interest rates because they value more of the stability of RMB. And for fiscal stimulus, they are in a way expanding, but local governments are constrained in terms of tax revenue. So we're expecting more talks in this plenum about tax reform and how to resolve the local government finances.
And talking specifically about tax reform, as you mentioned there, used to potentially support these cash-strapped local governments. Why are local governments, firstly, under such financial stress?
It was not a problem before 2021 because housing market was good. And among all the local governments, about 1/3 of their revenue was coming from the land sales. When the housing market was good, then it was not a problem for them to auction off those land. But now the land sales basically crashed. And for a lot of local governments, they also have to pay more during COVID for all the COVID tests, taking care of patients. And now they are basically delaying their payments for a lot of the suppliers. So we're in desperate need to broaden the tax base and also to prevent more tax evasions among the private sector.
Yeah, I was going to mention tax evasion because that, of course, is another key issue. How much of a problem is that for China, considering it's likely to be discussed and dealt with at this meeting?
Tax evasion was quite pervasive. It was one of the common practice for micro and mid-sized Chinese firms because it's quite easy to evade taxes. And the Chinese government has tried a lot of different ways in the past, but it was not successful. Now they have more measures to tackle this problem. One way to tackle it is through the online transaction because most of the small sellers would have an online account. And the government is also quite keen to collect more of the tax and non-tax revenue. In terms of non-tax revenue, it's targeting those companies that have evaded tax in the past. So they're trying to recoup some of those losses. And as a result, people are in a way quite anxious to look forward to more of similar measures.
All right. Wang, chief economist with the Seng Bank. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.